Hey everybody, it's your boy Lucky here, back with another video. Today, we are discussing chapter 1156 of One Piece. So, if for whatever reason you aren't caught up yet, and you haven't read this chapter yet in the manga, then by all means, pause right here, come on back, I'll be right here, I'll be waiting, so don't worry about it. So without further ado, for everybody else, let's get into it. So, again, chapter 1156 is titled Idols, and immediately we're taking 40 years into the past when the Kuja Pirates were basically global icons, led by Gloriosa, who we also know as Granny Neon from the Amazon Lily arc, who is now being shown her past and shown how she used to look back when she was in her younger days, and she was looking kind of nice, if I'm saying, she was looking kind of nice. A character who we also know, Shaki, who in this chapter is referred to as Shakuyaku, is her second in command. And so we always kind of knew, like, back in the day when we first saw Amazon Lily, that, like, Shaki had some kind of history with Amazon Lily, it being the former empress of that place. We just never really knew the full details behind that, and now we're getting that in full spades. And it's really cool being able to see, like, Gloriosa in her younger days as well as Shaki, and kind of seeing this really weird dynamic in which, like, Gloriosa has a very similar infatuation with Roger, the same way that Hancock has now with Luffy. And so it kind of gives new kind of a contextual context, to like what happened in Amazon Lily when it came to, like, Gloriosa, or as she's referred to back then as Granny Neon, kind of giving advice to Hancock, be like, hey, I've been there. I know exactly what it's like to, like, be infatuated with a man. I mean, infatuated with a man. And, girl, you need to get ready because, like, love is indeed a hurricane. While this chapter does introduce the Kuja Pirates, where it actually, like, begins off is, well, basically the Roger Pirates are in, like, a heated battle with, like, the Kuja Pirates, which, like, then leads into a confrontation with a young, Monkey D. Garp. And then we're immediately kind of shown that, like, unlike, say, Luffy and his innocence, Roger very much was falling prey not necessarily to Gloriosa, but to Shaki, because it seems as if, like, in a weird kind of funny way, even though for as beautiful as Gloriosa is, and she is definitely a 10, it seems that, like, her second command, Shaki, is just that much more beautiful, hitting that, those 11 and 12 marks. And it seems as if, like, not only is, some of Roger's crew infatuated with, like, like Shaki, but Roger himself, very much so, is infatuated with Shaki, almost to the point of it almost feels as if, like, they're in this, like, battle for, like, Shaki's heart. But Shaki, being the cool cat she is, basically, implies that, like no one is gonna be man enough for her. But interestingly enough, and this has been, like, a thing that's been going on throughout, like, the One Piece canon ever since we first saw Shaki and Rayleigh back on Sabaody Archipelago, is that there's always been, like, a kind of like a low-key kind of romance between the two, even though it hasn't been loudly proclaimed that they are in any capacity, like, dating or married or anything like that. It all kind of has that similar vibe to it. And in the panel, you can clearly see that while, like, all the other Roger Pirates are kind of, like, really infatuated with Shaki, and, they're really into her and they really like her or whatever, and, like, Shaki is just giving them no time of day, the one person who seems a little bit, like, like, undisturbed by Shaki's beauty, but still kind of, like, taken off guard a little bit, is Rayleigh. And, like she's very, like, nice and kind of giving a little wink, being like, I see you, homie, I see you fighting, and I kind of like that. So, I don't know, I'm just saying, maybe, like, Shaki and Rayleigh, this is, like, the beginning of a beautiful friendship? Going back to the plot at hand. So again, like, we're coming into the story as, like, Roger and the Kuja Pirates are having this kind of altercation in which Roger is basically attacking the Kuja Pirates in an attempt to kind of, like, steal Shaki back and win her for his own, to either have him on his crew or presumably more. I don't know. Like Roger seems to be a man to lady, so for all we know, maybe this is just his hilarious attempt at, trying to win Shaki's heart, even though Gloriosa is the one that has the infatuation with him. But in the midst of this, really hilarious chaos, all of a sudden, then we have the Marines come, and of course they are led by a young Monkey D. Garp, in which, like, both Garp and Roger kind of get into that very kind of, like, Lupin the Third-esque Zenigata kind of relationship, in which they kind of immediately kind of like stop everything and decide to do battle. And it's here that we kind of like begin the chapter and kind of like just see like how like youthful and honestly powerful like these characters were back in their heyday. And it's really cool being able to see like like Roger a lot more recently, just like really showcasing how much he resembled like Ace back in the day and how tenacious he was, and kind of like just seeing like who these people were before they became the legends that they're gonna inevitably become. It's then that we turn over back to Elbaf, where we see like this really like kind of cute interaction between Harold, Ida, and Loki, as like it seems like Loki's got himself into a little bit of trouble, and Ida is kind of like healing his wounds and kind of like basically condemning the people who were supposed to be watching him, and just saying like they had a responsibility to kind of watch him, and kind of seeing like the kind of cute interaction in which like Ida just couldn't be bothered by any of kind of like Loki's mean words towards her. I think deep down Ida understands that Loki is probably operating from a place of like fear and loneliness, knowing that like his mother has just passed, and also like possibly even having an idea that his mother didn't really love him the way that like a mother should love their child, and as a result is kind of created what Loki is today. And so like it's a kind of cute interaction in which Harold and Ida are kind of like dealing with Loki, and Loki right at this point in the story is like just hell bent on having this deep desire of one day joining the Rock's pirates. Like ever since he first met Rox, he's kind of like been infatuated in the same way that Luffy was with Shanks, into wanting to kind of like become a pirate and join like Rox's crew in order to kind of like accomplish the goal that he's trying to do, which is like like really change the world in some kind of like deep significant way, presumably through like power, because that's kind of the mindset that Loki's in right now. He believes that power is everything, and he doesn't really want to be within this like weak-minded world that the giants are trying to like build. Like the giants right now, even in the story, are trying their best to like give up their savage past in favor of creating a more peaceful future. And I think that like in some ways like Loki is fighting against that because of the fact that like that's their culture, and that's all they've ever known. It feels as if like this new peaceful route is going to slightly weaken and diminish like the kind of like good name of Elbaf and the giant pirates, and that's kind of where like Loki's at. We then cut right back on that same topic back to Rox as we head back to Hachinosu Island. We see Rox's crew has grown, like Big Mom, Kaido, this character named Silver Axe, Captain John Strusen even, who was like, obviously the person who got Big Mom into the pirate, world. And even the Fishman Barbell have joined up with, Rox at this gathering inside, Rox's kind of like crew skull, the same place that we see now in Blackbeard's crew that they kind of hang out at on Pirate Island. It's there that we see Rox finally reveal his Grandmaster plan to overthrow the world government, and he declares Elbaf is essential to that mission happening. Rox then goes on to say that he needs 2 legendary devil fruits, and one is located in Elbaf, and he wants specifically King Harold to consume it as part of this strange strategy that he needs in order to like really overthrow the world government and kind of get to a place where they can actually find some kind of like hope of succeeding in their quest to like really shake things up. Another interesting tidbit that was like actually mentioned by some of like Rox's crew is that apparently another big part of their plan that's contingent upon Harold being involved in it is that they also are trying their best to look for the lost giants that were imprisoned by the world government, probably the same giants we saw on Punk Hazard who were frozen in that strange scene that we don't know particularly what Caesar had planned for them, but like that Rox was hoping that he can somehow be able to like get a hold of them so that they can build basically an ancient weapon strong enough to again go against the world government and fight against the Holy Land, so that way like again that'll be a big part of Rox's inevitable plan to finally take down the Holy Land and seize power. So from this point on in the story, we have a kind of clear, like idea of where Rox is going. Clearly, he needs 2 legendary devil fruits, one of which he needs specifically Harold to eat, and he also needs Harold in order to like make some kind of like deal or partnership with the same giants responsible for like making possibly an ancient weapon. So we're talking about like two very powerful devil fruits and a possible like ancient weapon on the same scale of anything from Pluton to Neptune or whatever it is that like Rox is trying to plant. But like Rox is like definitely thinking big picture here, and he knows exactly what he's gonna need in order to kind of like even be in the same playing field to even have the conversation of taking down the world government. Now obviously we have hindsight, right? We know for a fact that like that's not gonna happen, and that like ultimately Rox's plan will fail. The interesting thing is though is learning more about whether or not like how close did Rox get to actually succeeding in this plan, and also what happened to like stop it from happening, because clearly Rox is an incredibly powerful character. There's already talks within the community about like where he scales up to like Mihawk today. Like Mihawk a fraction of the power that he was back in the day, or is like like Rox the gold standard for which Mihawk has to be at right now for us to really consider like Mihawk actually one of the strongest swordsmen, not just in the world but possibly even of all time. And now we're in this really crazy time period where like you can tell this is truly some One Piece final saga shit. Like we are at a point now in the story where like every arc now, is ever since Egghead started, just seems like Oda is in his A game, just being like, all right guys, I've been like holding a lot back for the last decade, like 2 decades of time, whatever. But now we're at a point now where it's time to start getting some answers. It's time to start like answering some mysteries and like really showcasing the world through some of these flashbacks. Because it used to be like you get a flashback and it's really pinpointed on one character. Like this should be Loki's flashback, but it isn't just Loki's flashback. It's Loki's flashback. It's his relationship with his father Harold. It's now somehow included Rox, and it's going to have like a real glimpse at what happened to Rox. It possibly even could get into the God Valley incident that involved Rogers, Garp, and Rox kind of going head to head and having that epic clash that changed the world forever, and learning more about that. And that's really exciting, especially when you think about right after this flashback, we're back in the present where like we have to have a real conversation about like like Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, and the rest of the crew going head to head with the God Knights who have this weird immortal power, and seeing if maybe like like we're gonna find more out about Haki and its relation to like defeating the God Knights, and even people who like are a part of like Emo's like Emu's like grand detail. We don't know anything, and it's I think and that whatever's gonna happen in this flashback has to directly correlate with what's happening now. So that means that more than likely we're gonna see like someone like Rox going to the Holy Land and having a direct confrontation with some of these characters, like some of these like like God Knight like characters, and possibly even like showcasing just how strong his Haki had to be to go toe to toe with them, and how strong we need to be in order to deal with it right now in the present day of One Piece with Luffy and the others. So all in all, like this chapter has been absolutely enlightening and incredibly fascinating, and I can't wait to see what's gonna happen next. This entire arc has been like a whirlwind of like interesting and reveals that like we're learning more about some of the legends of One Piece, not just for the character, but for the world itself, between like that and Nika and the end of the world, and all this like weird apocalyptic kind of like like talk kind of going in behind the scenes, and being very cryptic and stuff. And it's just been really fascinating with each chapter, kind of learning more within the Elbaf arc about what's getting ready to kind of like happen for the world, and how important Elbaf is presumably to the final war that's getting ready to start within the One Piece universe. But yeah, that's my thoughts right now, guys. Clearly, like there's a ton to discuss, so I would love to be able to hear your thoughts from you lovely One Piece fans out there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, let me know what you think for the future. Do you think that Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, and really the rest of the crew, have a chance against the God Knights? What do you think is like Rox's big master plan? What do you think about this kind of funny relationship between the Kuja Pirates and Roger, and and Shaki's relationship with Rayleigh? I want to hear every single thought you possibly could have. So again, let me know all that in the comments below. Until next time, guys, this is Lucky X out. Make sure to hit that follow button, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, and I will see you guys next week for another chapter of One Piece. Peace.